You're a competent adult. You run a household, a career, a life. And then you walk through your family's door for the holiday. And within 20 minutes, you're someone you thought you left behind decades ago. The peacemaker, the screw-up, the invisible one. The one who keeps everyone laughing so no one fights. You don't choose it. You just step into the room and the old role slips back on like it never came off.
Let me show you exactly how fast it happens, because the speed is the strangest part. You are fine in the car. You are fine on the doorstep, an accomplished person with opinions and a whole life. Then someone makes the old joke, or your sister uses that tone, or your father asks the question he always asks, and something in you folds. You hear your own voice go smaller. You catch yourself explaining or apologizing or smoothing something over that isn't yours to smooth. By the time the plates are on the table, you are not the person who drove there. You are the character they remember. And on the drive home, you will feel it, that particular exhaustion, that quiet shame, that bewilderment at how a grown adult can be reduced to a teenager by a single afternoon. Maybe you promised yourself this year that it would be different, that you'd stay calm, stay adult, not get pulled in, and maybe you lasted an hour. This is one of the most universal and least talked about experiences there is, and nearly everyone at that table is quietly having some version of it. Tonight, I want to explain precisely why this happens, why it is not a weakness in you, and how you begin to walk into that room and stay yourself. So let's start by naming the parts, because you can't step out of a role you can't see.
Most families, without ever deciding to, hand out roles. There's often a golden child who can do no wrong and a scapegoat who carries the blame for everyone. There's the lost child who learned to disappear and the mascot who jokes the tension away. You didn't audition for yours. It was assigned early and based on what the family needed, not on who you actually were.
Sit with that last part, because it's the key to everything. The role was assigned based on what the family needed. The golden child carries the family's pride, so the family has something to feel good about. The scapegoat carries the family's blame, so no one else has to look at themselves. The lost child asks for nothing, so there's one less thing for tired parents to manage. The mascot breaks the tension, so the household never has to sit in the hard silence. Every role is a job, and you were handed yours before you were old enough to know you could refuse it. You might recognize yourself instantly, or you might be a blend of two. And notice how the roles lock together, each one holding the others in place. The golden child needs a scapegoat to shine against. The scapegoat's failures make the golden child's success mean something. The mascot's jokes exist because the tension is real. It's a closed loop. That's why, even now, your siblings can seem frozen in theirs too. The brother who's still the baby, the sister who's still in charge. Nobody grew out of it, because the parts were never really about your character. They were about the vacancy that needed filling on the day you arrived. Now here's why that job never seems to end, why you can be 50 and still get slotted right back in.
These roles are sticky for a reason. A family is a system, and systems crave balance. Everyone learned their part, so the whole thing could stay predictable. So when you come home and try to be your real grown self, you're not just changing your behavior, you're threatening the entire arrangement. That's why the family pushes, often without realizing it, to put you back where you belong.
Think of it like a mobile hanging over a crib. Those little balanced sculptures. Touch one piece and every other piece swings and jerks until the whole thing settles back to how it was. Your family is that mobile. For years, everyone hung in a careful balance, each person's role counterweighting everyone else's. When you show up different, calmer, firmer, no longer playing your part, you're not just moving yourself, you're making the whole mobile lurch. And the others, without any malice, without even knowing they're doing it, will reach out and nudge you back into position because the old balance felt safe and the new one feels like falling. This is the part that catches people off guard, so brace for it. The harder you push to be seen differently, the harder the system pushes back. Say something unusually honest and watch how fast someone changes the subject or makes a joke or brings up the story about you at 16. That's not them being cruel, that's the mobile self-correcting. The pushback isn't a sign you're doing it wrong, it's a sign the system is working exactly as designed and that you've started to change it. But knowing all of this still doesn't stop the feeling, the bodily lurch backward the moment you arrive.
There's a reason you feel 14 again at that table. Walking into the place, hearing the voices, smelling the kitchen, it drops you straight back into the nervous system you had as a child there. Psychologists call it regression, and it isn't weakness. It's memory, living in the body. The adult you spent years becoming is still real. It just gets very quiet in that particular room.
Let me be precise about this because it takes the shame out of it. Your body learned that house before your mind could argue with it. The specific creak of the stairs, the smell of the same cooking, the exact pitch of your mother calling your name, these are not neutral facts. They are cues wired into you across 1,000 childhood repetitions, and they load the old program faster than thought. This is not you being dramatic or immature. It is the oldest, most protective part of your brain recognizing home and reaching for the survival strategy that worked when you were small. And it's worth knowing this happens below the level of decision. By the time your conscious, capable mind notices you've shrunk, the shift already happened, a half-second earlier, in a part of the brain that doesn't take questions. That's why willpower alone fails at that table. You can't outthink a reflex that fires before thought. The competent adult didn't disappear. She got overridden for a few hours by a much younger operating system that still runs whenever the room says, "You are the child here." Once you understand it as a reflex and not a failing, you can finally start working with it instead of hating yourself for it. And we have to be honest about what that override actually costs you, because it is not nothing.
And it costs you. You leave those gatherings drained and a little ashamed of how small you got, how quickly you defended yourself, how easily you slid back into pleasing or performing or shrinking. You spend the whole drive home replaying it, wondering why decades of growth seem to evaporate the second your mother gives you that look.
The cost is heavier than one bad afternoon. It's the days of dread beforehand, the rehearsing of what you'll say this time. It's the way you're quiet and raw for a day or two after, snapping at the people who love you, carrying a mood you can't quite name. It's the slow accumulation of it. Years of gatherings where you left a little smaller than you arrived, where you betrayed your own grown self just to keep the peace and drove home despising yourself for it. And there's a subtler cost underneath all that. The distance it puts between you and your own family. Because if they only ever meet the character, they never actually meet you. And you go home lonely in a house full of relatives, unknown by the very people who are supposed to know you best. That shame, that loneliness, is the tax the role charges, and most people pay it silently, year after year, certain they are the only one at the table who feels like a fraud in their own family. Before we talk about what to do, I want to go back to the beginning for a moment, because understanding where the role came from is what finally loosens its grip. No one sat down and cast you cruelly. Your role was the most useful thing a small child could offer a stressed system. If your parents were overwhelmed, the child who asked for nothing was a relief, so you became the easy one, the lost one. If the home ran on tension, the child who could make everyone laugh kept it from boiling over, so you became the mascot. If someone had to be the problem so the adults didn't have to face the real one, the most sensitive child often got quietly elected, so you became the scapegoat. Here is the thing to hold with some tenderness. You were a child solving an adult problem with the only tools you had. The role was intelligent. It was adaptive. It probably earned you what love or safety or peace was available in that house. That's exactly why it's so hard to put down, because on some deep level, it still feels like the price of belonging, and it usually ran in the family long before you. Your mother had a role handed to her, so did her mother. The whole cast was assembled from parts that were passed down generation to generation, nobody choosing, everybody inheriting. Seeing that can soften the anger. The people who cast you were mostly just playing their own assigned parts too. The small you decided, correctly, that playing along kept you connected. The grown you gets to question a bargain the child never got to negotiate. You are not betraying your family by outgrowing the role. You are just no longer a child who needs it to survive. So here is the shift that changes everything, and it's smaller and calmer than you'd expect.
Here's what frees you slowly. You cannot change the role the family wants you to play, but you can change whether you accept the casting. You can stay warm and still not take the bait. You can let a silence sit instead of rushing to fill it. You don't owe them the old performance, even if it's the only version of you they know how to love.
This is the whole reframe, so let me make it as clear as I can. You have been trying, maybe for years, to get them to stop casting you, to finally see you differently, to hand you a better part. That is the one move that never works, because you don't control the casting. They do. What you control is entirely on your side of the line, whether you audition for the role they offer. The scapegoat doesn't have to defend. The peacemaker doesn't have to rush in. The mascot doesn't have to perform. When the old cue comes, the tone, the look, the question, there is a half second, a tiny gap where you get to choose. Step into the costume, or simply warmly decline. You cannot stop them from holding it out. You can stop being the one who puts it on. And here's what makes it bearable. You don't have to announce any of it. No speech, no confrontation, no dramatic scene where you finally tell them who you really are. You just quietly stop performing, one small moment at a time. Every time you don't pick up the costume, the role loses a little of its power to define you. And just as importantly, a little of its power to define you to yourself. So let me make that concrete, because just don't take the bait is easy to say and hard to do in the actual room. Here is what declining the casting looks like in practice. 1. Learn the pause. The role runs on automatic. The fast defense, the quick joke, the reflexive apology. So slow the moment down. When the old cue lands, take one breath before you respond. That single breath is the gap between the child's reflex and the adult's choice. Most of your power lives in that one held second. 2. Use the warm non-answer. You don't have to argue with the role, you just don't have to feed it. Maybe. That's one way to see it. I'll think about that. You can be kind and completely unhooked at the same time. You are not being cold, you are being unavailable for the old fight. 3. Give yourself an exit and an ally. You are not required to stay at the table for 6 hours. Plan the shorter visit. Book the reason to leave. Text one person who knew you before the role, who can remind you which version is real. A 5-minute walk outside can reset the whole nervous system that the room hijacked. 4. Expect the pushback and don't panic when it comes. Remember the mobile. When you don't play your part, the system will lurch and someone will try to nudge you back. A comment, a guilt trip, a joke at your expense, that is not proof you failed. It is proof you changed something. You don't have to fix their discomfort. Let it swing, it settles. And there's a gentler, longer piece underneath all the tactics, because the goal was never just to hold your ground, it's to let them eventually meet the person you actually are. That's slower work, and it asks something quieter of you than winning. It means showing up as your grown self, even when no one asks for her. Speaking in your real voice, at your real volume, about your real life. Not the edited version that keeps everyone comfortable. It means tolerating the strange discomfort of not being understood right away, because the family knows the character so well that the real you can look at first like a stranger. Give them time. People who have related to a role for 40 years don't update overnight. Some of them never will, and you will have to grieve that. The parent who can only love the costume is a real loss, and pretending it doesn't hurt won't help you. But some of them quietly will begin to meet you. A sibling will exhale and drop their part too. Change one piece of the mobile long enough, and sometimes the whole thing slowly rebalances around who everyone actually is now. You cannot force that, and you cannot do it for them. You can only keep being real enough and warm enough that it becomes possible, and then let people surprise you, or not, in their own time. So let me leave you with the truest thing I know about that room and that table.
The role was never the truth of you. It was a costume the family needed someone to wear. You're allowed to walk in as the person you've actually become, and let them slowly get used to her. You might not be the character they remember. You get to be something better, yourself.
This year, when you step through that door and feel the old part reaching for you, I want you to remember that you are not 14, even if the room insists you are. You are the adult who drove here. Stay warm. Take the breath, let the silence sit. Decline the costume gently, again and again, for as long as it takes. You are not there to win the old fight or to finally be understood. You are only there to be yourself, at the table, on purpose, which is the one thing the role was always designed to prevent. So let this be the year you stop performing and start simply attending as who you are now. That is not a betrayal of your family. It is the quiet beginning of an honest one. Walk in as yourself. Let that be enough. It always was.